Most men think jealousy is proof of love, but sometimes it's a test, a silent game, a reaction trap that exposes more than words ever could. When she tries to make you jealous, most men do exactly what she expects, and that's where they lose control. The truth is, when she tries to make you jealous, the real battle isn't about her. It's about how you respond under pressure. One reaction can change attraction, power, and the way she sees you forever. And almost no man is taught how to handle this the right way. If you're a man who wants to understand female psychology, emotional control, and how to stop making the same mistakes most guys repeat without realizing it, subscribe to the channel now. We're building a strong community of men focused on growth, and we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Your support helps us get there faster. Topic 1. Why she tries to make you jealous in the first place. A lot of men assume that when a woman tries to make them jealous, she's simply being manipulative. But most of the time, it goes deeper than that. It's not always about being cruel. Sometimes it's an indirect way of measuring emotional impact. Some women want to know if they still take up space in his mind. Interestingly enough, this usually isn't something planned or even fully conscious. There's a detail most men miss when someone tries to trigger jealousy. They're usually looking for an emotional reaction, not a fight. And it's like tossing a small rock into a lake just to see how big the ripple gets. If he reacts right away, she gets confirmation. She realizes she still has influence, still creates emotion, still has the ability to shake his balance. And for many people, that becomes a quiet form of validation. A common example is when she casually brings up another guy, maybe mentioning someone who is funny or interesting. On the surface, it sounds harmless. But the tone, timing, and eye contact often carry something more. Men who pay attention realize the real test isn't in what she says, it's in the reaction she's hoping to get. And that's where the emotional game quietly begins, because most men react before they even realize they're being watched. Topic 2. The biggest mistake most men make immediately. When she tries to spark jealousy, most men react way too fast. It's almost automatic. Their expression changes, their tone shifts, and suddenly they feel the need to figure out what's going on. They start asking questions, looking for clues, trying to decode hidden meaning. The problem is that, in that moment, they stop observing the situation and start being controlled by it. There's a quiet emotional trap hidden inside this. When a man reacts impulsively, he reveals valuable information without realizing it. He shows exactly where he feels insecure, what he's afraid of losing, and how much he depends on that validation. It's like a poker player showing his cards too early. The situation stops being about confidence and starts revolving around anxiety. And anxiety rarely looks attractive. Some men believe jealousy proves they care, but it usually does the opposite. Instead of looking secure, they come across emotionally vulnerable. Imagine interrupting your own peace just to react to something that might not even matter that much. The problem isn't feeling jealous, that's human. The real mistake is reacting before understanding the game happening in front of him. Because the next step isn't about words, it's about awareness. Topic 3. Why emotional reactivity kills attraction. There's something many men learn too late. Attraction isn't only about looks, money, or charm. In many cases, it's directly tied to how a man handles emotional pressure. When a man loses control easily, he sends a silent message that his emotions are controlled by other people's actions. And that changes how he's perceived in a major way. Emotionally stable people create a feeling that's hard to explain but easy to notice. They feel safe, not because they pretend not to care, but because they don't constantly need to prove themselves. A man who stays calm in uncomfortable situations communicates something rare: inner control. It's like someone standing steady during a storm while everyone else panics. That kind of stability stands out precisely because it's uncommon. Many people confuse emotional intensity with deep connection. But there's a huge difference between feeling something and losing control because of it. When he reacts impulsively, tension stops being attractive and starts looking needy. A confident man doesn't need to win arguments or compete for attention. He understands that certain situations reveal more about the observer than the person creating the reaction. And that's when the dynamic begins to shift. Because the next step isn't reaction, it's interpretation. Topic 4. The hidden ego game behind jealousy. Behind many jealousy games, there's something people rarely notice at first. Ego. Not loud, obvious ego, but quiet ego that wants confirmation. When she mentions another guy, posts something strategic, or subtly seeks attention, she may not be trying to push him away. She may simply want to know if she can still trigger an emotional response. It becomes an indirect way of measuring influence. The problem is that ego doesn't only exist on one side. Many men enter the game without realizing they're trying to prove something too. They want to show they weren't affected, regain control, or appear superior. And that's where things become dangerous. Two egos trying to win never create connection, they create competition. Instead of understanding, a silent battle begins where neither person admits what they truly feel. Picture a man watching a woman flirt subtly with someone else at a social event. If he responds by trying to compete, show off, or make her jealous in return, he's already inside the game. It doesn't matter who started it. Ego turns observation into conflict. And the strange part is that the harder someone tries to win, the more emotionally trapped they become. Because real power doesn't come from competing, it comes from understanding why the game started in the first place. Topic 5. The silent power of not reacting. There's a kind of strength very few men learn to use. The power of emotional silence. When she expects a reaction and doesn't get one, something shifts. Not because he's ignoring her or pretending not to care, but because he doesn't hand over instant access to his emotions. That creates a rare and uncomfortable space where curiosity starts to grow. After all, what doesn't react quickly often creates more questions than answers. Most people are used to predictable reactions. If they provoke, they expect frustration. They test, they expect explanation. When that doesn't happen, the mind starts filling in the blanks. It's like sending a text and not knowing how it was received. Silence creates interpretation. Sometimes saying nothing speaks louder than any argument ever could, because she begins wondering whether she still has the same effect she once had. This doesn't mean becoming cold, distant, or emotionless. The key is avoiding reaction in the heat of the moment. An emotionally strong man observes before acting. He understands that not every provocation deserves an instant response. Instead of reacting just to relieve discomfort, he stays present, calm, and aware. And that's when the emotional balance slowly begins to shift. Because now she no longer knows exactly what he's thinking. Topic 6. How high-value men see these situations differently. Emotionally strong men don't see these situations the way most people do. While others interpret jealousy as a threat, they see it as information. They don't panic, rush to conclusions, or turn every detail into drama. There's a quiet difference in the way they process behavior. They understand that impulsive reactions usually give away more power than necessary. A high-value man doesn't only focus on what happened, he focuses on what it reveals. He pays attention to context, patterns, and timing. Sometimes she's trying to get attention. Sometimes she wants reassurance. And in other cases, she may simply feel insecure and need to know she still matters. Mature men don't just analyze the action itself. They look for the motivation behind it. Imagine two men facing the exact same situation. One reacts instantly, changes mood, asks questions, and loses his peace. The other watches, breathes, and remains himself. Not because he feels nothing, but because he understands emotions don't always need immediate action. That difference may look small from the outside, but it completely changes how she sees him. Because when a man doesn't move on impulse, he communicates something rare, real control. Topic 7. What to do in the exact moment it happens. The exact moment she tries to make you jealous, everything happens fast. Your brain wants to react, answer, understand. But those few seconds are where most men lose control of the situation. Because the first reaction usually comes from emotion, not awareness. And men who learn to manage that moment change the entire dynamic. The first thing is body language. No tense facial expressions, no uncomfortable shifting, no sudden posture changes. A confident man keeps the conversation flowing, stays present, and avoids showing emotional urgency. Small details matter, calm eye contact, no interruptions, no competing for attention. These subtle signals say more than words ever could. In moments like this, calmness speaks louder than clever responses. If she brings up another guy, or tries to provoke indirectly, the best move is often to respond naturally. No sarcasm, no tension, no need for confrontation. A simple, relaxed, neutral response tends to be more powerful than an emotional one. Because the goal isn't to win a battle, it's to stay grounded. And when he does that, a silent question starts forming in her mind. Why didn't he react the way other men usually do? Topic 8. How to stay calm without pretending not to care. Many men confuse self-control with emotional coldness. They think that to appear strong, they need to act like nothing affects them. But fake indifference usually feels forced. People can sense when someone is hiding discomfort behind a mask. And that creates an awkward, defensive energy. Real emotional balance doesn't come from denial, it comes from awareness. A mature man doesn't pretend he felt nothing, simply refuses to let the feeling take over the steering wheel. There's a huge difference between feeling jealousy and acting from it. Emotions happen naturally, but reactions are choices. Think of someone who feels anger rise but chooses not to raise his voice. Not because he's weak, but because he knows impulsive reactions rarely improve anything. True calm appears when he realizes his value doesn't depend on her immediate validation. Doesn't need to prove he's the most desired, strongest, or least affected. Instead of playing a role, he stays authentic. And that creates a presence that's hard to ignore. It's emotionally grounded people. Don't try to convince others. They simply exist with stability. And that's where an important decision begins to appear. Whether to keep investing or recognize when something has crossed the line. Topic 9. When walking away becomes the strongest response. There comes a point when the situation stops being a test and starts becoming disrespect. Not every jealousy attempt is harmless. Sometimes she knows exactly what she's doing, repeats the behavior, and watches your reaction like pressing a button. When this becomes a pattern, the issue is no longer the jealousy itself, it's what the pattern reveals. Patterns always speak louder than isolated moments. Emotionally strong men understand that staying isn't always maturity. Sometimes the strongest move is walking away, not as punishment, revenge, or a strategy to get attention, but as a quiet act of self-respect. There's a massive difference between fighting for connection and accepting disrespect disguised as a joke. When someone repeatedly crosses boundaries, staying can cost more than leaving. Imagine a man realizing every conversation turns into a game. Every interaction becomes a test, and every peaceful moment depends on how he reacts. At some point, he understands he doesn't need to prove endless tolerance. He doesn't need to stay in an environment where his peace is constantly challenged. Because a man who knows his worth doesn't beg for balance. He chooses where it exists. And that choice prepares him for the biggest realization of all. Something that goes far beyond her. Topic 10. The real lesson. It was never about her. At the end of the day, many men believe these situations are about understanding women. Figuring out what she meant, why she acted that way, or how to respond perfectly. But there's a deeper truth hidden underneath all of it. The biggest lesson was never really about her. It was about how well he understands himself. Emotional situations act like mirrors, showing what still triggers him, what still controls him, and what still needs healing. When a man learns not to react impulsively, he's not just improving his dating life, he's building emotional mastery. That changes how he handles conflict, rejection, insecurity, and pressure in everyday life. A man who controls his response stops living at the mercy of other people's behavior. And that kind of emotional freedom is rarely taught because it requires brutal honesty with yourself. Maybe the most important realization is understanding that maturity doesn't mean never feeling anything. It means not getting lost inside what you feel. Real transformation happens when a man no longer needs to win emotional games to feel strong. He simply stops needing to play. And in that moment, something quietly shifts inside him because for the first time, peace no longer depends on other people's behavior. It begins to come from his own choices. Conclusion. In the end, most men spend years trying to understand women's behavior, without realizing that real change begins when they start understanding themselves, because this isn't just about jealousy, emotional games, or saying the perfect thing. It's about self-control. Knowing when to act, when to observe, and when not to hand over your emotions so easily. Ask yourself, how many times have you reacted impulsively and later realized you lost control of the situation? How many times have pride, anxiety, or fear made decisions for you? Maybe this is the moment to change the way you handle these situations. If this video opened your mind in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you'll learn more about male psychology, attraction, behavior, and emotional intelligence. And as we continue building this community, We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, so your subscription truly makes a difference.